Washington Journal is live this morning from the Cannon Rotunda. That's part of the Capitol complex here on Capitol Hill. And we're joined by Representative Kevin Brady, a Republican of Texas. He serves on the Ways and Means Committee, and he's also the Vice Chairman of the Joint Economic Committee. Good morning, and thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome back.
Thanks.
Post-elections.
Yeah.
As Congress faces this fiscal cliff, this so-called fiscal cliff everyone is talking about, what do you think are the right conditions to deal? Speaker Boehner has said that under some right conditions, he might be able to bargain a little bit. What are those?
Yeah, well, one, I think I'm cautiously optimistic that given the urgency and the seriousness of this issue, that we'll find a sound solution in time. I think it'd be irresponsible. I think Republicans believe it would be irresponsible for the president or either party to voluntarily drive off this cliff. So one, I think that's working toward us. But I think the key is we want a smart balance that gets the economy going, generates more revenue, as well as smart spending cuts and restraints. We really think those are the conditions that actually gets the economy moving and, assures our investors in America that we're serious about getting our financial house in order.
Would you agree to reworking the tax code? What would that look like?
I think it's actually critical. I don't see how we resolve the debt crisis without doing a fundamental tax reform. Here's a great example. Recent analysis showed that if the economy over the last 3 years, if the economy over the last 3 years had just been an average recovery, if we were just back where we were in 2009, our deficit would be cut in half this year. I mean, that goes a long way toward a balanced budget. With spending restraint, we get there. And fundamental tax reform, I think, is key to getting all that capital, off the sidelines, back into the economy to create the jobs we need. So I think fundamental tax reform, along with a bipartisan way to preserve Social Security, Medicare over the long haul that averts another credit downgrade, I think those are key elements.
What about rolling back on the Bush-era tax cuts, letting them expire for people who make over $250,000. President Obama is advocating for this.
Yeah, economically, it's not a smart move, and it isn't a serious deficit proposal, obviously, because so many more people now are in those top tax rates, including the majority of our net business income is actually in those top tax rates. Economically, it's a loser. And because that would only pay for 8 days of federal spending, it's not a serious deficit proposal, but a more serious, I think a smarter balance. Again, the economic growth that generates far more revenues than those tax increases does with the spending restraint. I think that's the smart balance going forward.
When we talk about restructuring the tax code, cleaning it up, it sounds pleasant until you think about, well, what does that really mean for everyone's bottom line? So who would that hit? How would it affect a middle-class taxpayer? How would it affect a higher earner?
Fixing the tax code is hard. If it were easy, it would have been done years ago. But because it's become so complex and I think such a drag on the economy, and most people just think it's unfair, I think the timing's exactly right to do that. And to begin to lower rates and simplify it, you have to take a look at all those tax expenditures. There's a long laundry list of them. I think all of them have to be initially on the table for discussion. Let Congress and the President actually sit down and work through all those tough decisions. What I think we're lacking is a firm, no fudging deadline to actually do fundamental tax reform. And I think if that's an important part or a key part of this bridge into next year, I think that's going to be hugely helpful.
What should the deadline be?
Next year, 2013.
So the end of 2013?
Yes.
December 31st?
No, I think much earlier than that for planning purposes. But obviously the House has passed its ideas. The Senate and the President have different ideas. Great. Pass them. Let's sit down at the table. We're ready to work through all these issues. At the end of the day, a pro-growth tax code, a real pro-growth tax code that's fair, is going to be good at every income level, especially for those who are looking for jobs.
If you'd like to talk with Congressman Kevin Brady, Republican of Texas, here are the numbers to call. Democrats can call 202-585-3880, Republicans 202-585-3881, and independent callers 202-585-3882. Just to dig into this a little bit more, some of the very popular deductions that Americans can take include things like a mortgage deduction. You deal with issues relating to marriage and child tax credits. Would those be on the table?
I think everything has to be, and my belief is that to get to a lower rate, not everything can stay in those tax expenditures. but not everything will go either. That really is a part of our discussion on Capitol Hill is what are the elements of the tax code that actually grow the economy, that help families save, work, and invest. Those are really key components of that tax code. We ought to have that discussion. What are the elements that are most helpful to growing the economy, to saving more, which we do a terrible job of in America, investing more as families and businesses. Those are all key elements.
All right, let's go to the phones and hear from Bill in Denver, Colorado, independent caller line. Good morning. Bill, are you with us?
Oh, Bill, this is Bill. Good
You're
morning.
on the air. Go ahead.
Hey, I got one comment here on the 47%. 47% of the people don't pay taxes, and wouldn't it be a good idea to put a 1% sales tax on everybody? That way everybody gets in. You get criminals in, you get tax cheats in, you get everybody in the program, and everybody plays. This is not 50% of the country that needs to pay taxes for 300 million people. Let's get everybody back in and then go from there.
Bill, do you feel like you pay fair taxes?
I pay fair taxes, and I pay my taxes. I make $50,000 to $1,000 a year. I pay my taxes every single year. I'm self-employed. I pay my liability. I pay my own insurance, everything. But I'm tired of 50% of the people opting out. Social Security, welfare, everybody's opting out. We have 1% sales tax. Everybody in the country gets in. 100%,
Okay.
not 50%.
Thanks for your call, Bill.
Yeah, two thoughts. One, adding a new tax on top of all the other federal taxes, I think, is a mistake. It's just an invitation for government to tax more and more and more. I do think, one, that 47% figure is really an indictment of how terrible our tax code is today. It also tells you a lot of people aren't working or on federal benefits, rely terrifically on the help they get. I think a stronger economy is going to help lower that percentage as well. I will tell you, I think lowering the rates, simplifying the tax code is a very good first step in what Congress and the President can do right now. I still hope someday that we have a discussion about eliminating the income tax, the gift taxes, the death taxes, and replacing it with a retail sales tax. Frankly, I think that's the strongest type of tax for our economy over the long haul. It's bold. I don't think Congress is quite ready or the country ready for it yet, but we ought to have a discussion about what are the significant changes long-term that we can make.
Kathleen's up next, a Democratic caller in Hammond, Indiana. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good.
I just have a quick comment and a question. There was a report, a news report that came out last week about a report that was done by, I think it was the Tax Policy Center that went back 50 years. And the report showed that it is a total fallacy that when you raise taxes on the wealthiest 1%, that it limits job creation. And the report came out like maybe a year or so ago, and Mitch McConnell buried it. He didn't want that information known. So the news report is out there. The report's out there. I'm sure you could find it. But Mitch McConnell was the one that buried it and didn't want that publicly known, that it's a fallacy. And I want to ask, especially you, Mr. Representative, the last 2 years since you people have taken over, you barely have showed up for work. We're paying your salary. I don't see any of you, not one of you, putting any skin in this game. You're sitting there. You don't even show up for work for half the 2 years you've taken over. We're paying your salary. We're paying your benefits. I don't see you putting any skin in the game. Now, you're talking about my husband has been a steel worker she's going into 37 years now. He's got to work about 60 to 80 hours a week to stay in the middle class. He's paid in this notion of the 47%. don't pay taxes. And this notion of entitlement, that word's got to change. My husband's been paying into his benefits for 40 years. And so don't you sit there and tell me.
Kathleen, can I ask you, we'll get the congressman to respond, but let me ask you a quick question. What do you think about increasing the age of people qualifying for Medicare, Social Security?
Well, see, my husband's been a steel worker he's going into his 37th year. And he's only 53, but he's been working since the age of 13 and has been paying into his benefits. But my husband, he's going to work probably another maybe 10 to 15 more years. That's no problem. But all I have to say is I'm real sick of Mr. Representative.
Okay, we got your perspective, Kathleen. So Kathleen expressing a fair amount of anger at Congress's role, but talk to us about your work in terms of being back in your home district versus being here, because Congress has been quite absent for the last few months during the election campaign from Washington.
Well, yeah, during the election campaign. The truth is the House has been extraordinarily productive. You know, we passed, I think, 39 separate jobs bills to try to get the economy going. We passed bills to try to about $20 trillion of tax cuts to at least get us back on the path toward a balanced budget again. The problem is all those bills are sitting in the Senate. Not one of them has a vote on it. We haven't, in my view, seen leadership of the president on any key issue, especially Social Security, Medicare, and the debt. Be that as it may, this caller made a great point at the very beginning. She asked about a report, and I think she's referring to the Congressional Research Service had a recent report that said tax rates don't matter. But the study they made is flawed. Two big flaws in it. One, it didn't consider all the state and local taxes, the whole burden on businesses and individuals as far as the economy. Major flaw, but here's the big one. They went back 50 years, 1945, looked at the tax rates from 90-some% to what it is today and concluded no impact in the economy. The problem is, when tax rates were very high, it affected a very small amount of the income in America. Today, tax rates at 35% affect a lot of families and a lot of small businesses in there as well. So today, as much as 18% of our total income is affected just by that one top rate. So when you impact that, when you raise that, you have a big impact on the economy. So the report is flawed. Today, things are different than they were in 1945.
Congressman Kevin Brady, he's in his 8th term representing Texas' 8th district, just won re-election. We're watching this week to see leadership decisions made in the Republican caucus. What are you watching for? What should we pay attention to?
Well, we have an embarrassment of riches in really good quality candidates to lead our conference. We have excellent choices at every level. You know, we're going into those conversations here in just a few minutes. I expect us to come out with a very strong team. I expect us to come out very unified in our efforts to try to get the economy going again, tackle this deficit the way it is. And so I'm encouraged by it. We've got great candidates and great members.
Any tip off to how you think things will go?
I'm a terrible prognosticator, so don't ask. I'm not good at it.
We'll stay tuned.
Thanks.
Let's hear from Nancy, who's a Republican caller. Nancy, where are you joining us from?
I'm joining you from Florida.
Well, welcome. Go right ahead.
Well, I've been watching the show, and I just really have a couple of comments to make. I am a Republican. I did vote for Romney, but the election is over, and I do think our Republican representatives to represent the Republicans of the party. And I kind of wish that President Obama would have opened up his meetings to the mom and pops businesses and the franchises instead of all these big corporation names that are meeting, aside from the unions that were there yesterday. I just don't feel that this 250 ceiling is fair, that those people struggle to employ people and to keep the communities going, and restaurants and franchises and grocery stores, and it does seem like big corporations are kind of taking over the mom and pops, and I just hope the representatives in Congress keep representing the Republicans out here.
Nancy, since you're a Republican, what do you think about letting taxes increase on people who make $1 million or more?
Well, That's not a bad idea, but I kind of also find it a little ironic. This is the first time anything that President Bush did is respected by the Democrats. So I don't know. That's kind of up to our leaders in Congress. But this 250, I think, is ridiculous. I think it's a job killer, along with the other regulations and Obamacare.
Okay. Congressman Brady.
Well, it really raises a great question. Why should small businesses and families in Florida pay more higher taxes to pay for President Obama's spending? I mean, why should they be punished for spending they don't probably agree with? And again, this is not a smart balance, and it's not a serious deficit proposal, because it won't get us any meaningful way back toward a balanced budget. It doesn't grow the economy. We think politically maybe it's a great, smart move. Economically, deficit-wise, it's not.
All right, let's hear from our next caller, who's an independent. Larry is in Chicago, Illinois. Good morning.
Good morning, Libby. Representative, I have a couple of questions. The first one, did you sign the Grover Norquist tax pledge?
Yes.
Well, then how do you square that with the oath of office? It is in derogation of your oath of office, because you have now turned your loyalty to an outsider as opposed to the American people.
Yeah, and I have to disagree with that. And let me tell you why. That pledge was to my voters. I mean, that was to tell them and make it very clear to them that I don't support raising the top rates or any rates, marginal income tax, that I do support lowering rates, closing loopholes, creating more pro-growth tax code. That's exactly what I said in that pledge. I would still believe it's exactly the right thing to do.
I disagree. That isn't what the pledge said.
Well, I have to tell you, I do know that pledge. I read it before I signed it. I've reread it recently. And in my district, in the 8th District of Texas, they believe, as I do, that we have a spending problem up here, not a taxing problem up here. And so there's a reason I got nearly 80% of the vote here 2 weeks ago. Those reflect the values of our district.
Where does Grover Norquist fit in right now? I mean, is that pledge causing problems in terms of being able to negotiate, move forward in good faith, put everything on the table?
Yeah, I don't think it does. From the standpoint, if you read it and really think about what it says, look, you just don't raise taxes for the fun of it. You know, you don't close loopholes and deductions just for the fun of it. You do it as part of fundamental tax reform to grow the economy more. I think that is the right solution going forward. And so I think it's been a nice political bumper sticker type of discussion, but I don't think really relevant to what we're trying to do.
Jackie is a Democrat in Eastlake, Ohio. Hi, Jackie.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Representative Brady, you talk about the 47% that don't pay income tax in this country. What you're talking about are people who have worked all their lives that are on Social Security, that are living on Social Security. You're also talking about people that work every day of their lives for $8, $9, $10 an hour, who are trying to raise their family on that. And because of the fact that they have a family and they have a mortgage, they don't pay taxes. They don't pay federal taxes. They pay state and local and sales taxes and everything else. Your Social Security tax, your FICA tax. So don't tell me that these people don't pay tax, and don't tell me that they're sucking off the government, because they're not. They're working people, and you're just not being fair to them.
And
the other thing I want to say is, you're talking about Grover Norquist. This man is an unelected person who's making you sign a pledge that has nothing to do with the country.
Ma'am,
okay, thanks, Jackie.
Yeah, thank you. Respectfully disagree on all counts, especially at the very beginning. You made the case that we're talking about the 47%. The fact is, Republicans are not. Democrats are raising this issue over and over. They see political advantage in it, but one of our frustrations as Republicans with that 47% is that many of them don't have the good paying type of jobs they want that would allow them to be taxpayers. Our frustration is that we have an economy that is flying so low and so slow. It's very weak. We have so many people unemployed, so many people on food stamp, so many people who don't have a choice. They have to rely on the government. We want that 47% to be reduced by stronger economic growth. We want those who begin in the lower classes of income to become middle-class taxpayers. And we want those in the middle class to rise to higher levels as well. That's our frustration.
Congressman Brady, we've been talking about this so-called fiscal cliff that Congress is grappling with, as is the White House.
Yeah.
Do you expect, you talked about how you'd like to see a long-term major reform, but do you expect something to be hammered out before Christmas? Are we looking at a last minute, as Congress sometimes likes to do, taking things to the very last deadline they can in this calendar year?
As Congress sometimes likes to do, as Congress always does. That's exactly right. You know, I'm optimistic. I don't expect an agreement much before the Christmas holidays, but I do expect an agreement. And I think the key to it is a credible bridge into next year that stops the tax hikes, that substitutes smarter spending cuts than those that are slated to occur, and really sets that no fudging deadline next year for fundamental reform and entitlement reform. I really think that's the key, and it's more than doable. There's no question in my mind.
Blake is a Republican in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Good morning.
Good morning. My comment is just, I'm coming at maybe from a different perspective, but you're talking about the $1 million figure, and since I'm anonymous, basically, I made $1,030,000 last year, and I just got my tax bill from my CPA. I'll pay $270,000 in federal income tax, and I'll pay another $45,000 in state tax in the state of Oklahoma. And I'm a small business owner. I say small. We've got 300 employees. I will assure you that tax rates do affect businesses. As a sub-S owner, a subchapter S owner, Obamacare affects our employee practices as far as benefits we can provide. I've noticed that the Obama administration is targeting businesses like Papa John's Pizza that comment openly and honestly saying, you add expenses to business, the business has to react. And it is so naive to watch different callers say different things. There's a pot of money that comes in, and that's revenue, and there's a pot of expenses that go out, and those are your expenses. And every business and every family in America starts with the revenue, prioritizes the expenses, and has hopefully something left over to live on. And these tax policy, when we allow the president to frame, and frankly the press, and I'm not off on a tangent on liberal media, but using the term, well, it's only going to affect the upper 2% of taxpayers or revenue earners, you really got to flesh that out, and I would hope the congressman would too, because those 2% represent maybe 40% of all the taxes raised. So I'd like to see the Republicans say, well, wait a minute, let's really talk about, we're talking about 40% of all revenue raised, not get into a 2%, because reasonable people who make $50,000 are going, well, $250,000, that's a lot to me. And if you're only talking about the upper two people, well, you're not talking about you're talking about the revenue raised. And if you position it properly, I think they would appeal to a fairness issue. Anyway, that's my comment.
Before we let you go, Blake, the president's meeting with business leaders today. Is that a move that you applaud?
I think that's a photo op. I think that you've got a president who absolutely has a distaste for business. We've kind of seen it, and he doesn't understand that. Well, first of all, look at his background. He's not a business owner, and the congressman's right that people like me, 300 employees, add up, and more regulation and the healthcare law and just higher taxes. It's just naive again to think that doesn't affect your hiring practices. And plus, he's right on capital. I've got a ton of money in cash. A ton meaning for me. I'm terrified of the stock market right now. I think everyone is. So you're just sitting in cash at 15 basis points, earning no investment return.
And we're all waiting. Congressman Brady's eager to talk with you.
What Blake just said is what we hear from businesses of all size back home along Main Street, that the constant obsession with higher taxes, more regulation. The president's health care law is changing their hiring patterns. There's no question about it. And his point, too, there is a lot of capital sitting on the sideline that people want to invest. He doesn't make any money leaving it in the bank. He makes it by investing in new buildings, new equipment, new software, new salespeople. Businesses are reluctant to do that. The president's higher taxes doesn't encourage that investment. It actually discourages. The smarter balance has got to be stronger growth, smarter restraint, and I'm still convinced that Blake, who would be in that 1%, supposedly the wealthy, he already shoulders, more than a third of the cost of all of federal government. The top 5%, almost 2/3 of that. Why don't we encourage more people to get into those brackets through economic growth rather than just taxing them?
Congressman, the payroll tax holiday is one of the items on the table here during the fiscal cliff. We may see payroll taxes go back up. An interview that you did in the fall, just about a month or so ago with CNBC, you said that payroll tax holiday is essentially blowing a hole in Social Security.
It is.
And is that, though, a tax increase?
Well, I think we need
roll
to
back on it.
I don't think there's any way responsibly, if you're serious about Social Security and Medicare, that you can keep that payroll tax holiday going. Budget gimmicks aside, we're borrowing between $140, $160 billion from foreign investors and the Fed just to pay Social Security this year. So I think the holiday needs to end. We need to replace those with lower tax rates of an equal or greater amount through fundamental tax reform. I think that's one of the factors that should drive the president in Congress, both parties, to sit down at that table. I really think this actually works for us as a Congress to get to fundamental reform.
If that goes away, taxes will increase. Americans will see less money in their paychecks.
If we move to a 10% rate for most Americans, 25% rate for those who are much wealthier, then we have a chance to lower those tax rates for every worker.
Let's go to Ron, Ashland, Kentucky. Ron's an independent caller. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, Ron.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Brady, for your service. It is appreciated. We are small business owners, and first off, we do support secession. I sincerely hope that at least sends the president a message that we are not happy with the direction of this nation. I also am a small business owner, and we were right after this election, we sent out our layoff notices. We're going to downsize our workforce by 50%. We're not very big. We're just a small little carpet store, but we have our expenses as everyone else, and we're going to see what happens the next 2 years. Right now, we're just going to cut our workforce. We're going to fulfill our contracts for the next 2 years, and we're at the age where we can, if we want to sell out, we can and retire.
Yeah. What would you do? Can I ask you? What you're telling me is what we hear all the time back home. What would you do? What would you advise Congress and the President do to get the economy going, to encourage you to actually hire rather than shrink your workforce?
Well, first off, this health care bill is devastating to small businesses. What we're looking at is literally going to cut into our grocery money. We love the boys that work for us. They're great guys, but with what's coming down the pike, there is no way we can be able to sustain ourselves. And again, we're in our 50s. We don't. We've been fortunate enough to get be successful, but we don't. They got to stop the spending. We're sick of being lied to and having our money stolen, and that's exactly what's happened.
Okay, we'll leave it there, Ron, and get a response from the Congressman.
Great. Look, the point is that much of what's happening out of Washington is a drag on the economy in a serious way. We've got to remove those roadblocks. They're jackknifed. I think the taxes, red tape in the president's health care law are jackknifed across our economy. We need to remove the roadblocks, and we're willing to work with this president and the Senate Democrats, because this was a mandate, I think, for Congress and the president to work together and lead. There's ways to do this and get it done.
Before we let you go, our last caller, Ron, mentioned that he's a proponent of the secessionist movement, people wanting to break away from America. There are some people in Texas who are advocating for that. What's your take on it?
It's a non-issue. Texans are proud to be Americans. We're proud to support this country. We just think it can handle its business a little better, but no, we don't support secession.
Congressman Kevin Brady, Republican, representing Texas' 8th District. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Coming up next, Democratic Congressman